Hey everyone, welcome to an Advanced Sports Analytics live stream. Today is Monday, June 21st. Sorry for the delay, just running through some things to kind of get prepared for MLB tonight. But we have a short Monday slate for MLB, 6 games. The second half of the New York Mets Atlanta doubleheader is not on the slate. No NBA, so kind of quiet DFS night. MLB figures to be kind of the best and most popular action. So we're going to go through briefly the 6-game slate to get you guys prepared for that for MLB contests on SuperDraft. So using our projections and optimizer, we can talk through some of the pitchers, hitting stacks to target, one-off hitters to target. So we'll select over to the main SuperDraft slate. And looking first at pitchers and sorting by value, so post multiplier projection. Urias really stands out at the top by a fairly substantial margin, looking like he is projecting 2 points better than the next alternative. It's not like an easy matchup or anything. I think San Diego is actually a pretty tough matchup, but I think the stuff for Urias is just quite good for 2x. Some high multiplier alternatives like Anderson or Kyle Gibson, while they might have like Gibson in particular, I think has, better matchup. Just the stuff isn't quite as good as Urias. He has the best 2-year expected WOBA allowed over the last rolling 2-year average on the slate. So 2x, I think that's really great, even though he does have the tough matchup. He's in the kind of top third or so on the slate as far as whiff rate over the so far this year. And if you extend that to a 2-year average, he and Molly actually have the two best. I'm sorry, not the two best, but two quite high whiff rates relative to the rest of the slate. I think Molly, makes for a strong play, kind of similar to Urias, like not drawing the easiest matchup. Minnesota has a high walk rate, as a lineup, just a high xWOBA aggregated across their projected lineup. But Molly, I think, also has pretty good stuff, above average whiff rate. I think behind Urias has the second best 2-year rolling xWOBA on the slate. So, I think at 1.75, Molly makes for a strong play, but definitely not separating in a huge way from, like, say, Kyle Gibson, who maybe doesn't have quite as good a stuff as Molly from like a whiff and contact allowed standpoint, but he does have the 2x multiplier. So it has a nice edge on Molly from a multiplication standpoint. And I think Oakland is probably a little better matchup, certainly from an implied run standpoint. That Oakland Texas game, 8 run over under, as where Minnesota Cincinnati has 9.5. So expecting a little better, I think, run management from Kyle Gibson. I think certainly a fine play for cash purposes, but Molly's strikeout stuff, I think, is really compelling from a tournament standpoint. And I think also, there's enough of a floor there to make him a strong consideration in cash. As we scroll through some other options, Kyle Gibson, as touched upon, I think, perfectly fine play. He's been really strong this year, and at 2x, it's a great multiplier. Not a huge strikeout guy, but I think with the 2x multiplier and his run prevention, I think makes for a really strong play. And you actually might, if you're doing like stacking, you might get relatively similar amounts of Molly Gibson, maybe even a little more Gibson, simply because I do think Minnesota is a team that we do want to consider for stacking purposes. Montas, I think strong kind of raw play, but the 1.55 multiplier makes him, he just needs a really strong game, I think, to be kind of a tournament viable play. That being said, though, like some of these guys that are higher multipliers than him, like Happ, Brett Anderson, these are guys that can implode pretty quickly. So and Hap, of course, has a tough matchup against Cincinnati. So, um, maybe you can get away with going like Urias, Montas. I do think if you go with something like Montas plus, say, like a Yu Darvish or something, you really just need a lot of high multiplier guys to fail, which, of course, on a 6-game slate, that could happen. But I think our projections tend to prefer these high multiplier players taking shots there as opposed to locking in on a guy like Darvish or even Montas. I think is relatively low multiplier in the context of the slate. Really, only Alzolay and Jaco DeRizzi have lower multipliers than Montas. Merrill Kelly, I feel like I kind of want to stay away from going up against Milwaukee. I believe that game is in Arizona too, which is not ideal. Milwaukee's going to have one of the higher implied run totals, probably the second highest implied run total behind Houston. So yeah, I think like Merrill Kelly in general, guy you want to stay away from. He has spots where I think maybe could be worth some consideration because he does have decent strikeout stuff, but can get beat up pretty quickly. I think going up against Milwaukee in Arizona seems more likely that he gets run out of the game early than sticks around and compile strikeouts. So yeah, I think really a slate where maybe makes sense to kind of center plays around these three guys. Sprinkles of Montas, and especially since like Texas, I don't think is a team super interested in stacking up. I think Garcia projects favorably for us. We can use that to transition over to batters, so sorting on value to see kind of the guys standing at the top. So yeah, like Adolis Garcia, I think makes for a really strong one-off play. So maybe in lineups where you aren't rostering Garcia, Montas makes a little more sense. But in general, that Texas, I guess, kind of Falefa we're reasonably high on. Nate Lau. So I don't know. I mean, Texas isn't looking like a terrible stack, so maybe no reason to exclude or be low on Montas on account of, or sorry, not no reason to be high on Montas on account of not wanting to stack Texas. They seem like a stack that we'll probably get reasonable exposure to. McCormick we're projecting really favorably. He's been great for Houston as of late. Has a really good matchup against the young pitcher Aiken, who has not been super great in the few starts he's had. Also, playing in Baltimore, it's a good hitter's park. Wind is blowing out or expected to blow out at 9 miles per hour. There is a slight chance of rain there, 30%. So, pay attention to weather when you're considering stacking up this game, although haven't seen any reports that game's in serious danger of getting ruled out. India looks like a strong play, batting expected or confirmed, I think, to bat leadoff. Yes, that Cincinnati lineup has been confirmed. So like India batting leadoff at 1.65, strong multiplier, some steal upside. Rojas, we typically like. He's got some stolen base equity, typically bats high in the lineup. Anderson, I think, is a reasonably good matchup. Yeah, so that kind of gives you a lay of the land, I think, of some of the individual plays. Don't know much about Larnach off the top of my head, but 1.75 multiplier for a guy batting third, I think, is pretty good spot. And as alluded to earlier, that game does have a reasonably high total. Cincinnati is the slight favorite, but Vegas projecting a decent run total for Minnesota. I like using the lineup stack tab kind of to get a sense of what teams I want to stack up. As touched on with India, Cincinnati is projecting quite well. Good matchup against Jay Happ. So looking at guys like India, Tyler Stevenson fits in well with India, batting fourth. Aquino, not really like in the mix. I mean, you could go, I do think going something like India, Stevenson, Aquino is a bit wide of a like a stack. I mean, you just have a lot of gaps in there. So it's looking like maybe the preferred approach might be like India, Castellanos, Stevenson, skipping over Winker at 2. But, Winker, I think we project reasonably well as well. So, you could even go 4 with like India, Stevenson, Castellanos, Winker. If you did want to include Aquino, you do have options for like a wraparound stack where you could go like Aquino, India, Winker, and skip over pretty much 8 in the pitcher. Or you could fade India, go Stevenson, Aquino, something like Votto. We don't have a very strong projection on Suarez, but something like Stevenson, Votto, Aquino, and skip over Suarez. You could even throw Castellanos in there too if you wanted to go 4. Our top stack, though, from a post multiplier value standpoint, second stack is going to be Houston. So a lot of options you can go with there. As we touched on, McCormick in the 2 slot, we like a good bit. Toro, we like. It's a bit far though for McCormick. So like you could go McCormick, Toro, Straw, but you are skipping over two guys. Castro, we don't love a ton. Seems like almost if you went with that, you would want to have Altuve in there too. So you're pretty much skipping over Castro at the 9 and going wrap around like Toro, Straw, Altuve, McCormick, or you could build, naturally kind of 1, 2, 3. We don't have a super strong projection on Gurriel. 1.15 is a tough multiplier for him, but going, just keeping it simple with like Altuve, McCormick, Brantley, I think would be a fine 3-player stack to go with. And then looking at Oakland, who we like a decent bit. Didn't see any guys rising to the top as kind of really strong individual plays, but it looks like there's some they're kind of a deep and potentially stackable lineup. It is a tough matchup going up against Gibson. I expect Gibson to be pretty popular. He's got really good, ERA stats, and he's just got good kind of generic stats, which I think people might gravitate towards. So getting some exposure to the Oakland bats might be a good kind of contrarian approach. So Canna makes a lot of sense at 2. Tony Kemp batting leadoff at 1.55. That's a strong multiplier. You could go Murphy for the wraparound and like skip 9 and go 1, 2, even 3. Just the top 4 guys really. Like, to me, this is a viable stack, and I think sometimes people overlook the wraparound stack. Or if you wanted to keep it conventional, you could go Laureano 4. You could even do something like Murphy. You could do like 8, 1, 2, 4. So you're skipping 9. You're skipping Pender at 9. Skipping Olsen at 3. But yeah, I think you can just do some sort of mix of these 5 guys. If you are keeping it conventional and going like, I don't know, you could do something like 2, 3, 4, 6, skip Moreland at 5, something like that. But I think this Oakland stack actually looks pretty interesting. It's kind of hard to pin down who is going to have a great game from Oakland. It's kind of all balanced. We have the top 6 A's projected with a delta of, just more than 1 projectable fantasy point. So, I don't know, thinking back to those NFL shows with Blender, like sometimes you have teams that look favorable, but it's going to be hard to pin down like who are the players that are likely to succeed should the team go off. Oakland does strike me as one of those teams, but I think going up against a potentially popular Gibson gives you some good leverage with the Oakland stack. We can just see how these stacks and pitchers might play out. So throwing on some conservative balance, 10% for pitcher, 5% for batters, preventing pitchers from being rostered versus opposing batters. So that's where like the, you might see guys like Gibson or guys like Molly who have teams that we're kind of interested in from a stacking standpoint. Going up against them might cut down on their ownership a little bit. And then we'll just set it to 10 and run. Sorry, putting in some lineups. So cycle through all teams give me stacks of 3+ players from a team with no more than 2 gaps in between. So I think, as we touched on with like Cincinnati, for example, going something like India, Stevenson, which is a 2-player gap between those two, and then Aquino, which is a 5-6. So, that'd be like a 4-player gap to me, or 4 kind of slot gap. My opinion, that feels like a bit thin, I think, or a bit, wide of a stack, trying to keep our stacks kind of tight. So we can see, looking here, actually seems to be pretty interested in going with this Minnesota stack. Buxton, Larnach, Arias. So even though Molly is kind of one of our top projected pitchers, actually showing more preference for Kyle Gibson so that we can get in Minnesota. See some Cincinnati stuff here. So actually fading India and going Castellanos, Stevenson, Aquino. We have some Oakland here, Canna, Kemp, Murphy. So the wraparound there. Surprised we're not seeing more Houston guys, more Houston stacks. I guess it's just that this Houston team is kind of spread out thin. Toro and McCormick, who are kind of the top 2 Astros, are kind of, they're spread out. Even though we do have a pretty good projection for Altuve. And, it looks like, I guess, we're just getting a lot of Houston one-off guys. Looking, though, pretty even from a stack and kind of exposure standpoint. Just a bunch of guys at 20%. Wonder if we can kind of get a better sense of what the optimizer's doing if we turn bounce down a little bit. Getting McCormick in here a good bit. Getting a lot of, it looks like a lot of Minnesota stacks with Buxton, Arias, Larnach. So, maybe that is a good way to go there. Minnesota was a team we didn't really discuss in kind of the specific plays, but seems to be liking that 1, 2, 3, I believe. Arias, leading off. Buxton. That makes sense, really, those 3 guys projecting super favorably. If we expanded this to like a 4 and 3, I would guess we would get not quite as much exposure to the Minnesota guys. So it looks like, Minnesota is like super top heavy with those 3 guys. But if we are trying to go with like a big 4-player stack, looking like, going with Cincinnati seems super popular. Looking like maybe Cincinnati for a team that we might want to do big stacks with if we are keeping like small stacks. Going like 3, 2, and then trying to add some sort of 2-player stack on top. Could see us getting, I don't know, maybe some Houston. This might take a while to run just because there's 2 teams to cycle through, but seeing still a lot of this 3-player Minnesota stack, and then looking like India Stevenson as kind of a pretty good 2-player stack. Looks like Toro Altuve is a fairly popular 2-player stack. Must be some Altuve straw, like wraparound 2-player stacks. Aquino probably getting some exposure to like, Aquino Stevenson type stacks, but, and then of course McCormick probably getting some McCormick one-offs. Like I think the optimal there was like a McCormick one-off. So it looks like it's wanting to stack Stevenson and India, and then going a McCormick one-off, Buxton, Arias, Larnach, 3-player stack. So looking like maybe that Minnesota stack, while as a 9-player stack, not super strong, they are very top heavy and have 3 highly projectable players in Larnack, Buxton, and Arias right down here. So that I think could be, a pretty strong stack. That would prevent you from rostering very much Molly. So we can, see in our exposures where even though we have Molly as the second best pitcher, we're getting a lot of exposure to Arias and actually more Kyle Gibson exposure simply because even though we like Molly kind of in isolation better, there's enough kind of to like with Minnesota that rostering the Minnesota guys will prevent you from rostering Molly and vice versa. So something to consider. Wish everyone good luck tonight in the SuperDraft MLB contests. They will be back, I know, tomorrow with Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals. So we will have another show for that. We'll have a show this week as well for the PGA Farmers Championship. Or I'm sorry, not Farmers, the Travelers in Connecticut. So that'll be either tomorrow or Wednesday. Stay tuned for that. So yeah, good luck to everyone tonight, and we will see you later this week.